Hello and welcome to Shark Jets. I'm SkidVis. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to do teleportation on the Quest and using the Unity XR toolkit. So we've got two ways to do it that are built into the XR framework. They're just basically drag and drop and good to go, but I'm also going to show you how to do it with code because I find that to be more flexible and usable. But first, one to like and subscribe, please. So go ahead and do that. And without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so here we are in Unity, and we're picking up where we left off on the last video. So if you haven't been watching those, please jump back and see how we got here. So basically we have our XR rig still sitting here. We have the XR interaction manager. And so to teleport, I'm going to do a couple of things to set up real quick. I'm going to create a new material or a couple new materials. So let's create a folder called materials. And in here, I'll just create some materials. I will call this one green, and I will change its albedo to green. It's bright, a little darker. Cool. Now I'll just copy this, Control D, maybe call this one blue. I just want to create some different surfaces that we can look at. So I'll create one more just to be safe. Red, why not? Let's keep it RGB. So let's go red. Cool. All right, so here's our XR grid or our XR rig, and we're facing this way. So doing teleporting is actually super simple. So we'll go ahead and just right click here in our hierarchy and you'll see XR again. And there's two things down here that have to do with teleporting. So we have teleportation area and teleportation anchor. And I'll show you the difference between the two of those. So a teleportation area, so you can see I put that down and you can't see any difference now, but you'll see it up here. There's teleportation area, and if I click, you see it's actually on top of our plane. So I'm just gonna move this forward real quick and zoom out a little bit. And then I'll throw a, I'll make this blue. Let's make it blue. Okay, so what this is, a teleportation area. That means this whole plane is available to teleport to. And then I'll do the next one, which is a teleportation anchor. And they're very similar. You'll see that this also appeared where we were. So I'll just go ahead and move this one over here and change its color to green. Now the difference between an area and an anchor is that with an area, if I teleport and I want to teleport to this area, if I point to this area here and teleport, that's where I will appear. And if I move the cursor and try to teleport over here, I will teleport there. With an anchor, however, if I click anywhere to teleport inside this plane, it's going to actually only teleport me to this blue cube. So I basically get to say, you know, this whole green area is going to be my teleporting trigger, basically. But the place that I'm going to teleport to is just this specific cube. So I can actually go into the anchor and move this cube. And so if I move this up, whenever I teleport anywhere here, it's actually going to teleport me into the air and I'll fall down to this plane. So that's how that works. And you can actually assign this anchor to anything. So we'll play with that in a second. Before we get started though, we need to add a couple things to our rig because teleportation doesn't just work out of the box. So we'll come into the rig and go to components, and you'll see there's a teleportation provider, which we will need. So we'll just add that. And as you can see, one of the things it needs is a locomotion system. So we can come back in here and type loco and add a locomotion system. Now, the locomotion system wants to know where the rig is, so we can just, either pick the rig from here or drag the rig in here, whatever you want to do. But yeah, you're telling it what you want to teleport. So we'll go ahead and do a couple more examples here. Let me take this plane and make it just a skosh bigger. Sure, I'll double it and then I'll move it back. Yeah. So I'm going to create a cube here. And I'm going to just put this back here, and I'm going to make the cube red since we have colors to play with. All right. And I'm going to, that's not where I thought it was. Okay, so I'll put this here, and then I'm going to duplicate it and move this one over here. I need a new color, so I'm going to make a yellow. Create material. I can just copy this one. All right, so let's call this yellow. And let's make it yellow. Cool. So this cube here is going to be yellow. Perfect. All right, so now we're good to go. I do want to make the red cube. Call this red cube just so I know which one's which. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and add the anchor to this cube. So I'll go to add component and look for teleportation anchor. And now you can see that it has that box and it's kind of offset because you don't want to actually teleport inside the box. You want to teleport on top of it. So it's going to pick the center of this cube to teleport you to. So now that we have all that set up, let's go ahead and just try it out real quick. Okay, so we are here. There's our cubes. And as you can see, when I hover over any of these areas, the cursor or the line renderer there goes white to let you know that it's something that you can do something with. This one is just a plain cube, so it doesn't do that. So if I squeeze the middle finger trigger, now you can see I'm on top of the red cube. And that is always going to see, I'm continuously clicking, and it's always just centering me on top of this cube because that's what we told it. And now over there with the green one, if I pull the trigger, again, I'm in the air because that's what I told it to do. I put that little cube a little bit in the air. And then I can keep clicking here and I'm not moving because it's always going to put me on the center of that cube. Now this one's going to be different. If I click on this edge, it's going to put me right on that edge. And if I click on that edge, it's going to put me over there. And that's the difference between an anchor and an area. With the area, you can teleport anywhere in that specific area. But with the anchor, you will always be in the middle of that cube. All right. Now this one, what did I make this one for? Let's go back into the code and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so what if you want to programmatically determine where you're going to go? And you don't want to use the teleportation area or anchor or anything like that. You want to just go anywhere, right? So we're going to need some scripting for this. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new script. And I'm just going to call it jumper. Why not? And we will attach that script to the rig. Cool. And then we will open it up and start typing. All right, so I'm doing my programming in an environment called Writer, which is like Visual Studio, but I prefer it to Visual Studio. It just has a lot more helpful syntax, but it's not free. So if you can afford it, if you'd like to have a better environment, I highly recommend Writer, but Visual Studio will work for this example just fine. So we need to do a couple of things to set up. I hate these comments, I wish they weren't there. Okay, so I'm going to create a couple variables here so that we can access them, and then I'll explain what they are. All right, so here's our code, and I will break this down as much as I can. We're going to need these two using statements here. Because we're using the Unity XR system and we're also using the interaction toolkit. So we need to have these using statements here, otherwise you're going to get a bunch of errors. So we're declaring a couple variables here in the beginning. These two are public. One of them is of type XR node. And basically any XR device is considered a node. So like your headset would be a node, your controllers would be a node, and if you had any like special future stuff like lasers or other devices that could be used with VR headsets, we don't know what's going to come out in the future, so those could be XR nodes as well. So we have a variable called input source, which is of type XR node, and it's public, and what that means is we'll be able to see it in the interface. And we have another one here called the cube, which is of type transform, and transform is basically an object's location in space in the world. So that's how we're going to get the coordinates or the position of the cube. So I've got a public variable called the cube, which is of type transform, and we'll assign that yellow cube to this variable. The next two are serialized fields, which means that they're not public, so they can't be accessed by code outside of this code. But by adding this serialized field, we can see it in the editor, and we can assign stuff only in the editor. So they're both private. This first one up here is a teleportation provider, right? Because we need to know what the provider is that's going to let us jump, and so we'll assign that and give it a name of teleportation provider. And then the next one, another serialized field, it's just a Boolean, and it's called isTrigger, and in this we're just going to store whether or not the user is pressing the trigger. We need to know if they're pressing it so that we can do something when they do. So when the script loads, it executes this start method automatically, and anything will happen in this method whenever the object is instantiated. So all we're doing here is we're getting the teleportation provider, right? Because we've assigned this script to the rig, and the rig has a teleportation provider. So we're telling it get the teleportation provider from the rig and assign it to this variable because we're going to use it later. And then we have the update method, and the update method, as you know, executes every frame, right? It tries to execute about every 50 times per second or whatever, but it also depends on what your frames per second is and stuff like that. So it's not a very consistent number, but it basically operates every cycle, or every frame. So you want to do your checks and stuff. It's basically always running, so you just want to do your checks and stuff in there. If they don't rely on physics, if they rely on physics, you want to use fixed update instead of just update. But anyways, in our case, this is going to work fine. So inside the update method, we are declaring a variable called device, which is of type input device, and then we are getting a device at a node, right? And so we haven't specified what the input source is, and let's go do that real quick. If we go back into Unity and check our rig, so here's our jumper script. Let me go ahead and close all this stuff out just to eliminate confusion. So here's our jumper script, and as you can see, there's a new section here called input source, and currently it's picking the left eye. We don't want that, right? So we come in here and this will show us all of the devices that we could use to get information from. So, you know, you can get information from the left eye, the right eye, the center eye, your head motion tracker, all that kind of stuff. We're only interested right now. I'm gonna pick the right hand. Teleportation would probably be on your left hand normally. Oh, well, it's up to you. I'm gonna pick the right hand because that's the hand I am using. So we've got that assigned, right? And then we've got the cube, and it's currently asking for a transform. We can, you know, click here and pick something. We can pick the yellow cube right from here, you know, or of course we can just drag and drop the yellow cube. And you can see it's not picking everything from the yellow cube. It's literally just getting its transform, which is its coordinates, right? Everything has this transform section, which tells you its rotation, its position, all that good stuff. So we're gonna get that from the yellow cube. And then we have this checkbox here that says is trigger. This is just so that we can visually see that we're squeezing the trigger, right? We wanna just know if the code is working. We don't wanna manually trigger this here, but we wanna be able to see this change when the code is running. So now that we have that set up, let's go back into the code, right? So the input source, we just set that as the right controller. So it's going to get the right controller, you know, and something like this, you probably don't want to have this running every update. But in our example, we'll do that. So we're setting up this variable called device. It's going to get the right controller for us. And then we're doing a check on that device, right? So we've got this device.try get feature value, right? So it's going to see, there's two different things. There's value and there's something else. What is it? Try get feature usage. So we're gonna use value for now, and we need to pass it two properties or two parameters. The first one is what are we checking for? And the second one is what do you want from that information, right? So it's an out. It's got this out, which means it's gonna pass that value to our Boolean here is trigger. So we got common usages dot trigger button. And if you do common usages dot, you'll see all of the different things you can get from a device. You can get its script, its trigger, its battery level, hand data is tracked, menu button press, all these different things you get to play with, right? But we're not gonna worry about all of those. We just wanna know if they pressed the trigger button, right? So we're doing a check to see if trigger button has a value. If it does, then it will throw it into our Boolean, right? And since it's the trigger button, it's only gonna be true or false, 0 or 1. So what this is doing basically is every frame, it is checking to see if we are pressing the trigger button, and then it is gonna say true or false to that is trigger Boolean, right? So then the next thing we do is we have an if statement, right? And it says if is trigger, right? Which is the same as saying if is trigger equals true, right? This is what I like about writer. See, it's kind of grayed out. That lets you know that that code is redundant. You're doing the same thing twice, right? So we can just delete that. And this is basically saying if is trigger is true, then call this method called jump. And so I declared a method here, it's private void called jump. And this is where we do our teleporting. So I'm creating a new variable called teleport request because you need to send a request to the teleporting provider, teleportation provider. So we've got a new variable called teleport request, which is of type new teleport request. And then we set a position that we want to teleport to. So we go teleport request dot destination position, and it equals the position of the cube. Pretty simple. And then we pass that information to the teleportation provider by calling teleportation provider dot queue teleport request, and then we pass it the teleport request. Now we're queuing them, right? So we can do like 3 jumps back to back, and they will execute in that order because it reads the queue in first in, first out kind of way. So that's all. That's pretty simple. We're just creating a teleportation provider or a teleportation request, and we're passing it to the provider with coordinates to tell us where to go. And then we're just checking in the update. We're checking for a trigger being pressed because there's no automatic way to check for trigger being pressed, unless you're using the XR stuff that you just drag on the stuff. But this is how you do it in code. I had to use this in one of my games because I didn't want to. Well, basically, I created a grappling hook and I wanted to teleport anywhere, and I didn't want to drop anchors everywhere and stuff like that. So what I did is I created a line renderer, not a line renderer, line cast, right? So I'm just drawing this invisible laser out of my hand, and anywhere it was pointing, it would give me the coordinates to that area, and then I would just pass that whenever they pulled the trigger, and I could just teleport anywhere. But that's too much to cover in this code, so we're just gonna get the direction or the position of the cube, and that's where we're gonna go. So let's go back into Unity and see if this works. Okay, so if you notice, I've got the headset on and I'm squeezing the trigger, and you see that is trigger is flashing on and off. So we know that that part of our code is working. And coincidentally, I'm on top of the yellow cube. So let me get over there. And as you can see, there's the yellow cube. Well, you can't see because it's in the shade. But if I squeeze the middle finger trigger, this teleport is going to work, right? The surface or the teleportation area is going to keep working. But if I squeeze the index finger trigger, it's going to put me on top of the yellow cube, because that's the code that we just manually wrote. The middle finger trigger will use the teleportation area because that's a select, and the index finger trigger will just automatically take me to the yellow cube. And there you have it, quick and easy, I hope. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, become a Patreon member, join my Discord, all that good stuff. And I will see you guys next time. Please make sure to comment also and let me know what you're interested in. I think I'm gonna do some triggers and opening doors and stuff like that next, but I'm open to suggestions. So leave a comment, leave a like, leave a subscribe, and I will see you next time. I'm still Skidvis. Peace out.